If you enjoy the content on this channel, please like and subscribe. Stonehouse is a British comedy drama television series dramatising the life and times of disgraced British government minister John Stonehouse. First broadcast from 2nd to the 4th of January 2023, the series stars Matthew Macfadyen as John Stonehouse, Keely Hawes as Barbara Smith Stonehouse, John's wife, Amir Hitley as Sheila Buckley, John's secretary and later mistress, and Kevin McNally as Harold Wilson, British Prime Minister, who served from October 1964 to June 1970 and again from March 74 to April 1976. The series was directed by John S. Baird from a script by John Preston. The series is part fictional, part fact-based account on how in November 1974, a prominent Labour British politician, John Stonehouse, the former Postmaster General within the Harold Wilson government and MP for Warsaw North, disappeared from a beach of a luxury hotel in Miami, Florida. Stonehouse left only a neatly folded pile of clothes behind after he swam into the sea to fake his own death. Stonehouse faked his own death in a vain attempt to avoid disgracing his reputation after engaging in espionage, forgery, theft, and fraudulent activities. He was extradited to the UK from Australia. The real John Thompson Stonehouse was born on July 28, 1925 and died on the 14th of April, 1988. He was a British Labour and Cooperative Party politician, businessman and minister who attended the cabinet of Harold Wilson. Stonehouse is remembered for his unsuccessful attempt at faking his own death in 1974. It is also alleged that Stonehouse had been an agent for the Czechoslovak Socialist Republic military intelligence. Stonehouse allegedly began spying for the Czechoslovakian government in 1962. In a meeting with Harold Wilson in 1969, Stonehouse was informed of assertions that he was a Czechoslovak secret agent. At the time, Stonehouse successfully defended himself. In 2009, the spy allegation was substantiated in an official history of MI5, The Defence of the Realm, by Cambridge historian Christopher Andrew. In December 2010, it was revealed that in 1980, then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher had agreed to cover up revelations that Stonehouse had indeed been a Czechoslovak spy since the 1960s, as there was insufficient evidence to bring him to trial. Stonehouse maintained the pretense of normality until he faked his own death on the 20th of November 1974, leaving a pile of clothes on a beach in Miami Beach to make it appear that he had gone swimming and had drowned or possibly been killed by a shark. He was presumed dead, and obituaries were published in British newspapers, despite the fact that no corpse had ever been found. In reality, he was en route to Australia, some 9,000 miles away, hoping to set up a new life with his mistress and secretary, Sheila Buckley. Using false identities, Stonehouse set about transferring large sums of money between banks and further means of covering his tracks. One day, while depositing money under the name Clive Muldoon, a teller who handled the money that day later spotted Muldoon at the Bank of New South Wales under a different name, now Joe Markham. This led the teller to inform the local police. Stonehouse would then spend some time in Copenhagen with Sheila Buckley, but later returned to Australia, unaware that he was now under surveillance. The police initially suspected him of being Lord Lucan, who had disappeared a fortnight before Stonehouse, following the murder of his children's nanny. They contacted Scotland Yard, requesting pictures of both Lord Lucan and Stonehouse. On his arrest, the police instructed him to pull down his trousers in an attempt to establish whether he was or was not Lord Lucan, who had a 6-inch scar on the inside of his right thigh. Stonehouse was eventually arrested in Melbourne on the 24th of December 1974. Although unhappy with the situation, the Labour Party did not expel him. Their parliamentary majority was very narrow. On the 4th of April 1976, Stonehouse attended St George's Day Festival, hosted by the English National Party. He later confirmed he had joined that party, making Labour a minority government. Stonehouse would conduct his own defence on 21 charges of fraud, theft, forgery, conspiracy to defraud, and causing a false police investigation and wasting police time. His trial lasted 68 days. And on the 6th of August 1976, he was convicted and sentenced to 7 years in prison for fraud and received a criminal bankruptcy order. He then agreed to resign as Privy Councillor on 17th of August 1976, becoming one of only 3 people ever to resign from the Privy Council in the 20th century. Stonehouse would be released in January of 1980. Unfortunately, on March 25th, 1988, Stonehouse collapsed on the set during an edition of Central Weekend in Birmingham, during the filming of a programme about missing people. He was given emergency medical treatment at the studio, and an ambulance was called. Just under 3 weeks later, early on 14th of April, he suffered a massive heart attack at his house in Dales Way in Tottenham. Unfortunately, this time Stonehouse could not be saved, and he died in hospital at 2:30 a.m. Some interesting trivia notes. Both John and Barbara Stonehouse are played by real-life husband and wife Matthew Macfadyen and Keely Hawes. Kevin McNally takes on the role once again of Harold Wilson, the UK Prime Minister. McNally previously played Wilson in Legend in 2015. Stonehouse's real-life daughter, Julia, protested against her father's alleged spycraft for the Eastern Bloc, both in this production and in the Channel 4 documentary, The Spy Who Died Twice, also about John Stonehouse. Now, I found this to be a really insightful and fascinating look at this very extraordinary man, John Stonehouse, who led a very strange life. Look, the show portrays his life in a sort of tongue-in-cheek manner. And Matthew Macfadyen delivers a really charming and likeable performance here of really a man that was in some ways a bit of a scoundrel, who of course upped and left his family, his job and his career, all to basically avoid dealing with his problems. Look, the show is very well made, although I did find the score somewhat overwhelming at times. A score should always just be in the background and never dominate what you're watching, and I found this whimsical score at times tried to turn the show into an almost whimsical comedy rather than a real-life story about a real-life man partaking in a crime. But look, when you look past that fact, it's a really well-made show. Matthew Macfadyen turns out another excellent performance, as does of course his real-life wife, Keely Hawes, who plays his disgruntled wife in the show. I also particularly enjoyed newcomer Emia Heatley here as Sheila Buckley, and she performs the role particularly well with a slight speech impediment. Kevin McNally turns out a strong performance here as the jaded Harold Wilson. All in all, I found the show to be very interesting and fascinating. How this man really thought he could get away with this is somewhat unbelievable. And it's a funny portrayal because on one hand, John Stonehouse really is a scoundrel. He cheats on his wife, he partakes in espionage, and of course he tries to defraud the government by leaving and pretending he's dead. But of course all of this makes for a great drama series. I would have preferred the series to make me take a slightly more serious tone to the subject matter, but nonetheless it's a charming and likeable enough show that you can easily watch and get by its 3-episode runtime. With its witty and charming performances, fascinating storyline, yet over-the-top score and whimsical nature, Stonehouse gets an 8 out of 10.